Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. Today's Wednesday, the 26th of March 2014. I'm going to cover different articles including food prices and the weather. I'll get into some crazy stuff today though, and my third video will be basically geopolitics, Russia, Ukraine, but a lot further than that, tied in with some natural gas pipelines. Alright, so the first article is Spring Arctic Blast targets Mid-Atlantic to the southeast United States over tonight into Wednesday morning. They have a little graph here. I checked the HARP status, and it was basically a little bit on the west coast, southwest, and a decent amount on the east coast, but not too much further than that. They say frost conditions look likely all the way to the north of Orlando, Florida, and the freezing line will reach nearly to reach to the Gulf Coast. I was mentioning in the last couple of videos about how this springtime that doesn't want to come, the winter that doesn't want to let go, is going to affect the food prices. But this is already, the food prices have already been going up, and I'll get into that along with meat prices going up. It says here that U.S. food prices are set to go up 19% in 2014. So the spot price, not future speculation driven, of U.S. foodstuffs is the best performing asset in 2014, up by a staggering 19%. They said, "We are sure the weather is to blame, but what happens when pent-up demand from a frosty East Coast emerging from its hibernation bumps up against a drought-stricken West Coast unable to plant to meet that demand?" This article right here, meat eaters gulp record prices before U.S. grilling peaks, from Bloomberg. And I love the way they started this article out, because they actually start out with someone that is a competitive eater, which me personally, I cannot stand that idea of eating in competitions, just stuffing your fat face for a reward or something like that. But that's how they started out, so that you feel guilty that you're a meat eater, right? Because you're eating competitively. You're not doing it in order to survive, to get essential proteins and stuff. So, and I know you can get just protein from plants and stuff like that, but some people do prefer to get it from meat. But either way, they start with this story about this guy eating a dozen 11-ounce hamburgers in 10 minutes. But he says here, at any time of the year when U.S. prices usually are at seasonal lows, meat is rising faster than any other food group. Even before the peak in demand for summer grilling, the domestic cattle herd, they say, is the smallest since 1951, after years of drought and high feed cost. The spread of the piglet killing disease is tightening hog supplies too. Cattle and hog futures in Chicago at the Board of Trade reached record highs this month. It says, while higher wholesale prices are a boon to suppliers like Tyson, they're eroding profit margins at Chipotle, Mexican grill restaurants, Hormel Foods, maker of Spam, Vienna beef, and all the other ones. So they're charging more for their customers. So they said that we had to raise prices more than once this year. This type of market shift will affect all processes and all consumers eventually. It may not happen right away with everybody, but eventually the cost goes in, and it'll get passed on to the customer, of course, but that's, whatever. But these type of companies, Tyson and Cargill and all them, National Beef, it's a subsidized industry. There's not that many companies, and what this is going to really affect is small time, providers of cattle and stuff like that. It says here, why does taxpayer money go to big meat lobbying group? Each year, a trade group representing the beef industry collects more than $40 million in tax dollars to promote its agenda and battle political opponents. It's an unusual arrangement, considering that most lobbying organizations rely on private funding to fund their activities. It all began in the 80s during efforts to help the plight of farmers who were struggling to stay in business. So what was happening here, you had basically the government back in the 80s, they were forcing ranchers to pay $1 per head of cattle to the state beef councils, which would in turn give the money to the federal agency, the USDA, which winds up distributing around $40 million annually to promote their beef industry, encouraging Americans to eat more beef, like the commercials you saw. But basically what it does is this National Cattlemen's Beef Association, that promotes it, presses for policies that undermine their own way of life and the public's interest by favoring large packers like Cargill and them and other corporate giants. It says now they own or control 85% of the meatpacking business. I'll finish up with this. This is kind of interesting. This says that they stopped funding, right? So people stopped paying their membership dues to this thing, and it's basically all coming from public money, taxpayers. The lobbying activities include fighting proposals that are overwhelmingly supported by the American people. For instance, this one thing is a plan. They want to block a USDA plan requiring the industry to label meat being sold to consumers to know if it's coming within the United States or other countries. So it runs counter to what most people actually want. In 2013, a poll revealed that 87% favored mandatory country of origin labeling for beef, and 90% support a mandate of food producers to disclose whether it was processed domestically. And this is something that they've done and actually just undid with poultry that's being made or processed in China. It's being processed in China. So it's just kind of a strange trend that's happening recently. I've covered this as well, with the poultry industry. They've increased the speed in which they can, process the chickens. They changed the labeling. They're processed in China, and you won't really know it. Also, they're deregulating the industry, the poultry industry, and then they're deregulating the meat industry. So, ultimately, I think most of us understand that it's best to buy as local as you can and organic as you can. But the way that these big companies, just to give you some backstory here to how these companies really find the ways to stomp out the smaller competition, the local farmers. They bring in refugees. So refugees and diversity visa immigrants head to Cargill pork plant in Illinois. So lower wages and increases in work speed with a result in skyrocketing in injuries made the jobs unattractive for most white skilled workers since the 1980s. Turnover at the plant was 72% in 1990. The salary, however, now has a whopping $13 an hour. The type of jobs that anti-immigrant crowd claims that refugees and immigrants are taking away from Americans. Actually, again, public funding and tax dollars are made to, along with private organizations, NGOs like I think it's Lutheran Services and the Catholic Church, bring in a lot of these immigrants from like East Africa, they say, Somali mostly, and Hispanic, to provide low-wage work in these small towns. And actually, to house them and get them all set up locally, the people pay for it with their tax dollars. So again, this is big corporations swindling, using people's own money to destroy their community, right? It sounds nice and good. Well, yeah, it's going to bring jobs. 2/3 of its 2,100 employees at Cargill were Hispanic or East African. And lastly, these people are more desperate. So, they're able to be exploited more easily, i.e. cheap wages, and then, of course, with tax breaks. And then we get to this article here. Humans were terrible, always have been. Fossil records show we've left waves of extinction in our wake. So, he said, there's two things that I noticed with this. This guy is obviously an evolutionist, and the other thing is basically he's saying that we're inherently bad. Now, I guess you can say, well, yeah, I guess technically that's right when you look at how bad some things are, but then you have to think about, again, these humongous companies that exploit not just people, but also the earth and just take resources, and it's not really about renewable anything. So you have something like this. Alaska gets huge helium-filled wind turbine that floats 1,000 feet up. That's nice, right? Sounds good. MIT, of course, is spearheading it instead of just regular organized free people. But in other words, it's being used with your tax dollars, probably to be used for some kind of military applications. But the point is that, okay, yeah, it sounds nice, right? Helium. And you think about, the Zeppelin back in the day, right? That the Germans had, and how it exploded. And then many people say, well, that was the Americans that blew it up or shot something in there. And then a good point was made, and it makes sense, that I heard recently, which was it was actually the oil industry. It was the, Standard Oil and them. They would have the biggest stake to not see that type of flying or alternative energy to compete with them. So it's all about competition always. energy resources, like what's going on in Ukraine, gas pipeline. So this guy, is going to go on there and basically say that we're just inherently evil and we kill off the earth and stuff. But and we're not like completely innocent or anything. But at the same time, who's into transhumanism? Who's gonna get into a spacecraft or something like that and try to go somewhere else and leave us in this hellhole? Kind of like Elysium and many other sci-fi movies. Well, it's going to be the billionaires, the same ones that started Facebook or have eBay and PayPal and GE and rich CEOs that run the meat industry. So, they don't give a crap about the Earth, right? And then they'll use our own money against us so that we can try to live a more sustainable lifestyle. China is selling bottled air to tourists as the smog is described as an environmental crisis. That's right? Pollution killed 7 million people in 2012. So this is what the World Health Organization warns. So, and they got a picture of China. That's basically who they're talking about. And then this article came out the same day. So they're basically bashing China for doing what the U.S. did. They had the same smog clouds. In fact, if you go to some areas like on the West Coast and certain areas of the Midwest, it's pretty bad too. But it's not as bad because they've deindustrialized, so they don't have as many jobs because they rely on technology. But also they just don't manufacture as much as they used to. They've done it and gave it all to China. So until China completely automates, like I said, using quote technology, then they won't need the Chinese people to work anymore. And that's when you'll start seeing rapid depopulation, 2050, which is what they expect and predict. I saw a map too about, U.S. actually, the air pollution's gone down, and of course they show China. I'm like, but you're spraying chemicals in the air, so they don't really want to point that out. Apparently spraying aluminum and barium oxides isn't nanoparticles experimenting on Earth. Again, all these national laboratories and the U.S. government and corporations experimenting on us and on the planet, that's not a form of pollution. So here's the kicker, though. If you think about it, it's to fight climate change, right? Or global warming, which was caused by what? A rising CO2. Well, see, they're going to blame you for driving your car, right? Because you don't really have you can't just go out there and make your own automobile. No, the government won't let you do that because corporations have an vested interest for you to not create your own form of transportation independently. No, they have to have MIT and all that stuff and big oil, right? So they're going to blame you, just like that evolutionists. Don't blame corporations for being monopolies and forcing us into very few choices, right? The big companies supposedly increase CO2, at least that's what they say. This whole landslide thing, it's catastrophic landslide in Washington. They warned of it, right? They know it was going to happen at some point. So who knows if you can actually do anything like, maybe they could just move people somewhere else. They could have, made it a safety zone or something. But they could have prepared for it, right? Like for the earthquake that's going to hit the northwest coast. I think it's the Cascadia plate, the one I was talking about with the 100-foot tsunami. They know about this. It's going to happen within any time to the next 100 years. Could they prepare, build up the dams, the infrastructure, Army Corps of Engineers? Yes, they can. But they're too busy giving money to humongous corporations instead of actually the money being used and decided by the people to prevent this. China with this bottled air. It's like, Americans, you really don't want to stop immigration, right? Because then you're going to pay a lot more for meat because they're going to have to raise wages, right? They don't get cheap labor. And all of your products from Walmart and everything, your clothes and cars and all of those prices are going to go up, right? If you don't want China to make your stuff, they're going to have to pollute. So while the West and the East are fighting over different reasons, like I said, one of them has to do with natural gas supplying to Europe and who's going to supply Asia, and they're fighting and squabbling over all this unsustainable energy resources. U.S. and Russia crews are blasting off to the International Space Station. That's right. So you know what their real focus is, right? The Red Planet on Earth. Spanish scientists recreate Mars environment. They want to get the hell up out of Dodge. That's why the Russians are into the immortality project of 2045, right? Transhumanism, just like the U.S. And them, all right? Zuckerberg and all them, they're into this AI, and that's what I'll get into in the next video. So please join me in part 2. This is GGN. I'm Darko. Thank you.